everybody. I'm your host, Solange Brown, and welcome to One Step Better. This is a podcast where we have conversations to encourage growth mindset. This week, I had the pleasure of inviting one of my high school teachers, Miss L. And for some educational background, Miss L graduated her undergrad at Queen's University in 2019 and then completed her master's at Queen's University in 2020. She then went on to complete her Bachelor of Education at Ontario Tech University in 2022, where she was now able to be a teacher and teach at schools. Together, we discuss how she, as an educator, works to integrate cultural competence into her teachings. She also gave great insight into why she feels it's important to do so. So, let's get into it. All right, good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. Today we have a special guest, Miss L, joining us today. We will be talking about cultural competence and more specifically, how teachers are working to integrate cultural competence into their curriculum and their teachings. So, my first question for you, Miss L, is what is your role as an educator and what levels do you teach?
Hi, thank you so much for having me on this show. Very excited to be part of this episode. So I'm actually a high school teacher, and so that means I can teach anything from grade 9 to grade 12, but I focus on English, history, and the social sciences specifically.
Okay, social science. Yep, I remember having you for all those things. Well, just English, actually. But it was a good time. Okay, so on our topic of cultural competence, how would you say that you would define it?
So if I'm thinking more generally about the idea of cultural competence, I think it just means interacting, respectfully, meaningfully with people across different cultural backgrounds. And I mean, that's pretty broad. That could refer to someone's, ethnic, cultural, religious background. It could also just refer to, folks who have very different lived experiences. In the context of today's discussion around education and teachers, I feel like in teaching or really any public service job, there's certainly more emphasis on making those connections for the purposes of learning, but that still means that, communicating effectively and ideally meaningfully is really important, whether that is between staff members or between students and staff. And when it is between students and staff, there's ideally more emphasis on creating trust to, really just create an environment where learning can happen, but also, students can feel very affirmed in, their own lived experiences and in their own unique positions.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, through doing this whole, research stuff, I think that I also learned that cultural competence, when I first heard it, the idea of it, I thought it mainly had to do with, actual culture and stuff. But looking more into it, I see that it includes, every aspect of somebody's identity, their age, religion, race, sexuality, all that stuff that comes into play. That makes, us who we are. So, yeah, I think that's important to take all that.
Good point.
Yeah. And so that kind of ties into the next part. It's just how would you say that you ensure that these perspectives are represented in the materials that you present to your class?
So that's a great question. I'm lucky enough that, in teaching the humanities in English and history, I think, it can happen really organically because you do want to make sure that you are teaching things that reflect what the students are interested in, but also their lived experiences. So it's a really great opportunity in English classes to really make an effort to show texts that are very vast and are very diverse. I think that historically there's been a lot of focus on a particular canon of literature. It's very white, it's very Eurocentric. Mostly men, sometimes a couple women, sometimes maybe one or two, low-key queer authors, who knows, on a good day. But, trying to kind of move away from that more traditional Eurocentric view of literature and of history as well. So, I mean, I'm lucky that my school also really tries to emphasize the importance of choice. So, in an English class, allowing students to just choose their own novels or choose something even within the course that really spoke to them. In an assignment that actually I'm doing with some grade 12s, we are allowing them to choose any of the things that we've looked at all the way through up until now, so that if there was something that maybe spoke to one person and they just didn't get a chance to really sink their teeth into the material, it just gives them the opportunity to, go further with that. And I mean, depending on the course as well, I try to de-center, myself and my opinions as well. I think, while I am the teacher, I'm the adult in the room, I think it can just be so much more valuable to just try to facilitate learning about different perspectives by providing different materials and then letting those texts really speak for themselves. Because I'm not ever trying to claim somebody else's experience as my own. So I think it can be just even more valuable to try and just provide, as many perspectives as I can for the students. And then, it's less about me teaching it to them and more just about, facilitating discussion or just providing resources that, the school has access to or I have access to.
Yeah, and I like your point about, letting the students, decide, get a choice about what they want to read. Because I remember, in grade 10, before they, put into our curriculum about, having to do Indigenous studies in grade 11, I remember you had already introduced that to us. So, it gave us a chance to kind of just, learn more about, Indigenous peoples on our land, and also just, learn about them. But then also, I remember you also gave us choice, between books. When we had our ISU, I think I read Gutter Child or something, but that book really, helped me personally. It did, though. That book really, opened my eyes a little bit and helped me, because it was about just, it was about struggle, as a Black woman in Canada, but also just, seeing how they could overcome, it gave me a little inspiration. So that was really nice to be able to read something like that I could relate to.
That's great. And I mean, I feel like it's also important, especially, if we're thinking about diverse voices. And, you mentioned the shift in the grade 11 curriculum to really prioritizing Indigenous authors. It's important that we also don't get stuck in that pattern of only ever telling stories of resilience and struggle. And, the idea isn't just that we're providing one narrative from this one particular cultural experience, but that these things we should also be looking at, for you, as you say, with your identity, there should be a whole bunch of different texts that you can find and read. And it's hey, today, I feel like learning about the struggle, and then today, I just want to have a little giggle, and I still want it to be relevant to me, but it doesn't have to always be so heavy.
Yeah, that makes me think of that, that TED Talk, the single story TED Talk or something from that, I think it was a lady.
Oh, yeah.
That's what I just thought about, because it was you don't want to just be learning or hearing this one thing about this one group all the time, because then that will also contribute to potential stereotypes and biases, so stuff like that.
That's a great video.
Yeah.
Great resource.
Okay. And then just I know you guys always have workshops and stuff like that. So has there been any specific professional development workshops or training that you've gone to related to cultural competence?
I feel yes, in a more general sense, just in when we're looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion, I think it would be really, really great to kind of push things even further and, not just have it be about very general kinds of workshops. I think, there are resources like the calendars with multi-faith dates of significance, which can be really helpful, and that's, that's a good starting point to kind of, again, just to decenter the European, kind of Christian structure that the education system has been sort of built upon, to know, especially to know the dates that are reflected in the demographics that you teach can be really useful. But I think if we're going to have really meaningful, organic, and sort of earnest like practices of cultural competence with students and with teachers as well, like with across teaching staff, then I think that it would be great to go even further and to have people hired who are reflective of those diverse identities, and then it means these conversations can be even more organic and can be even more authentic, right? Because there's only so much that you can focus on, and there's only so much that you can say when you're trying to kind of speak on behalf of another group. So I found that a lot of my learning has actually come from the students. You know, when you foster those kinds of relationships where students do feel comfortable, then, you know, they will come and tell you those dates that are important to them, or the times of year that are important to them, or, you know, I know at the school that I teach at, a lot of students were fasting during Ramadan, and there were definitely ongoing conversations around, you know, making accommodations just to ensure that those students felt really supported in their learning while they were also undergoing fasting all day, right? So, but that also comes from those relationships with the students. So I think in a way like that has actually been a really beneficial, not to say that the kids are just there to teach me. That's certainly not what I'm trying to say. But I just think, you know, to your question about training, it's like I think sometimes that learning happens really organically.
Yeah, just like in the moment type. Okay. And,
yeah.
And then, like, do you feel that there have been like adequate resources like to support you teaching this cultural competence, but also like what kind of challenges then have you also faced in trying to do so?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think sometimes it can be a little bit surface level, you know, because things have to be sort of standardized across the board of education, and sometimes can feel like, you know, we're doing certain things just to kind of check a box.
Yeah.
Where, again, I feel like if we were really trying to be authentic, then that would be reflected in, like, hiring practices, you know. And so in terms of getting adequate resources, like, yes, there certainly are workshops and, you know, professional development opportunities, but then because those are often, or, I mean, it can depend. Like, sometimes they are provided by other teachers, sometimes it's board members, sometimes they will bring in external people, which can be really valuable. I do think sometimes I kind of go and search for resources on my own, or, you know, within my coworkers, if someone finds like a really cool resource, or even if it's just a really interesting article or video, or, you know, whatever it is, I think sometimes that, again, is coming more from my peers in a more organic way than, you know, it being provided. Because I think the practicality can sometimes vary when it's coming from people who are not in the practice of teaching and people who are not necessarily reflective of those diverse identities. I don't know if that makes sense.
That does make sense. I think that's true though, like at least like in high school, I don't think, well actually no. I think at our school, like I definitely did see like more women that reflected me at least, but like in general there wasn't much diversity among the staff even at school. Yeah, I don't know if it's changed now. It's only been a little bit, but I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're lucky at our school that we do have diversity reflected in the staff as well.
Yeah.
But, you know, there's still a lot of it's not as diverse as it could be.
Yeah. Yes, that's definitely something we could say. But also, yeah, I do like what you said about like being able to like building those relationships with students, and then like, you know, being able to not provide, but what was the word? Accommodate. Yes, being able to accommodate students like based on like just what they need, what they're doing like religiously, or just like with their culture. you know, because I see, like, they definitely did that and took into account, a lot of teachers at least, like in my grade 12 year, I saw they would take into account like what people had going on outside of school when like making dates for tests and like quizzes and stuff like that. So that's definitely really helpful just in general. But yes, our time is up. Miss L, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me today, you know.
Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. You know, always great to have conversations like these. They're definitely really important.
All right, signing out, guys. We'll see you next week. We'll be talking about student success. And yeah, have a great day, everybody.